you're right. When the big production companies come in here, they want to get everything. They want the soup to nuts, so they want every aspect of the film production. And we do that very well here. We do have very talented crew and very talented actors and, very talented location managers.
In the room, 52 Jokers Wild.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's show. And it is our 100th episode. And our special guest is Annie Doona, who is an educational and quality consultant, currently the chair of the board of the Galway Film Festival and the outgoing chair of Screen Ireland. So, Annie, welcome to our show, our special show, because it's the 100th one. And we, as I mentioned earlier on, we've been talking to a lot of producers, especially in the micro-budget area of the film industry, who are basically trying to get their first film out there to try and make their credentials. And we've been discovering that quite often that they've got an idea of what it is they have to do functionally to make their film, but they don't quite know how to connect to how to return the money on the investors. And I know you've got a few little insights in that you were talking to us about earlier on. Do you want to mention some of the, what would your advice be at this point to new producers who want to get their films made and get them out to an audience?
Okay, I'm delighted to be here and to join you for this 100th episode. Yeah, it's difficult because Ireland is a small enough market of viewers. I mean, we're a population, I know the population is now around 5 million, and it's probably a lot easier to get those cinema goers to go to a big Hollywood blockbuster or to watch something on Netflix than it is to get them along to their cinema to see a homemade Irish movie. Now, there are some exceptions, the big name TV series like Normal People recently, The Favourite, big films that have made it, that's great. But for a lot of producers, it's about how do you get that audience to your film? And often they are the smaller budget, the 1.5 million, the 2 million. So what Screen Ireland does is it works with those producers to try and develop their skills, their talents, and help them on their journey. And I think that if you look at a company like Element was making The Favourite for a good number of years in development with Screen Ireland. And now what Element does is it plays with the big boys and girls. So it's doing big international co-productions. It's a really well-known name internationally, and they're getting very large budgets. They're still very interested in making Irish film and Irish stories, which is wonderful. But they came on a journey from small-scale budgets, working in development, working in distribution and production with Screen Ireland and Screen Ireland advice, and taking advantage of the Section 481 tax incentives as well. They're very important as you scale up, as you get to the bigger productions. And without those tax incentives, a lot of those first films could not be made. So it is a bit of a journey for a producer. In all honesty, they're not going to make megabucks from their first film or couple of films. They're going to learn. They're going to nurture their own talent and the talent of their cast and crew. And I hope that they would get the support from Screen Ireland with the production, with the development, but also with the distribution, with the marketing. Use that expertise that's there, is what I would say to them, with the intention that they will eventually go on and start to make bigger budget movies. But it is difficult. It is difficult in a small film market. Now, one of the things that Screen Ireland did just before I left as chair was to argue that, the Netflix has changed our viewing lives in COVID and is likely to continue. And we put forward something that, again, has been supported by a number of reports, that those guys should be making a contribution to the Irish film industry, which would go some way to supporting those smaller Indigenous films and helping the development of producers and what they want to do. So there are things that we're proposing and that are already in place that can help those producers on their journey.
That's actually something that I was only talking to some people about in the last couple of weeks. And we were going, how it's macro needs to support micro. The big boys are here. It's not that there's like being an accountant, the tax man had to set the level for Section 481 at some figure. It was 250,000. It was never really meant for that figure, because if you do the finances and the legals at that level, then it becomes a high percentage of the cost. It was meant to attract the 5 millions, the 10 millions, to create the jobs into Ireland. And these are the high quality jobs getting the bigger blockbusters, as you say. But if we just bring that down a level, it's the there's an aspiration level from micro, short to first jump feature that is trying to be a minimum Section 481 to get avail of those taxes, to get a little bit more bang for buck budget for their first testimonial feature. So there is still a distance from the 1 million, 2 million to this aspirational 250,000 for those people that are trying to create they're trying to wrap themselves into being a producer director. They might have wrote the story. It's actually, I've even seen the language coming from some of the stuff from Galway Film Centre and like further afield going, it's this writer, producer, director. They nearly have to be the one personality, it seems, to promote themselves and go a bit further into other jobs to try and attract others to the rest of the team. That's the sort of language we're finding. They got to get their go-to team. They got to get together. They got to pitch not just a story, but the things that you just mentioned there, sales and distribution and marketing and finance, when wrapped around functional production, will give the talent an opportunity to present themselves to the future employers or the future money to keep on doing that again and again.
Yeah, it is about building that reputation and building that network. And a lot of the big feature film directors, writers, producers in Ireland started out with short films. I'm ex-president of IEDT. A number of them started out with a student film. Their graduation film got some attention. They then made another short film. They then perhaps co-directed. Some of them, and this is particularly true for women, went into TV and co-produced or co-directed on TV, on the soaps, for example, and then back into making their first feature film. So, it's not that you come in and you're suddenly, a huge star, you're suddenly...
No,
it is that journey, and it is about building up the finance. And I think, as you said, Galvin, building up the confidence of the investors and of the bigger producers. And I will just say that, the research that myself and other people have done say it's even harder for women. It's hard for men, producers and directors and writers to get that first break. It appears to be a lot harder for women. And even where women make their first feature, it's harder for them to get a second feature. So there's a lot of kind of dimensions going on, but it has to be seen as a journey.
Annie, the weird thing is you've touched on a weird glass. Before we started interviewing the film people, we cut our teeth actually talking to a lot of people in motivation. They were motivational coaches, mentors, and talking about comfort zone. So what we thought was most of the time we're finding people feel they're imposter. They get a little bit of imposter syndrome. They get fear because they're going outside their comfort zone because they're being asked to do roles that are not really their remit. But if they want to get them, we're using this language of trying to get these scripts out of drawers because they're in there, they're written. We don't know if it's a £1 million something or a flop. It can be the best thing and the worst thing. But at the moment, it needs other people to give it airtime, to give it their time, to invest their money, effort, and energy into it, to even figure out what it is in order to bring it from script to screen. And that's the sort of journey that we're on. But what the great thing about what you were talking about is we came across these other individuals and they were trying to address the glass ceiling for women in many industries, not just in film. And to bring it into film, we're seeing an awful lot of WFT, in terms of there's groups there trying to help break this glass ceiling for women. But the strange thing is, statistically, there's an awful lot of block and lock at the top level. Unless you kill a couple of men, open up positions, the positions just don't exist. Unless we create new opportunities, new content, new financing, then you have to cast and crew up there. Then you might have an opportunity to put in man or woman or anything in between. But we have to create new content. This content cannot already have its go-to crew, or because otherwise the position will not be available. Actually, Stephen Fellows, I never get his name right. I hope George corrects me.
It is Stephen Fellows.
Or Stephen Fellows. Has an awful lot of research of a couple of thousand films around the world, and he looked particularly at producer directors. How many got to do a first one, never got to do a second one and get the second IMDb? Whether new film or old film, was there statistically, was it new? Was it in low budget, you cut your teeth? It turns out the statistics said it was actually 50-50. So you can actually get an opportunity in, let's say, we call micro production under the 5 million mark now, just for the sake of it, and go, they don't need you to be approving
Yeah.
something anymore because it might blow the budget.
Yeah.
They want, if you've shown your talent on the way up, then they will take a risk with you potentially, as long as you package it end to end and says, this is our market, this is our audience, this is our subject matter. The great thing is, I've seen a bunch of women come up now from watching the Facebook, watching just the various film Facebook groups, and you can see them. There's the Mo O'Connells, the Roisin Carneys. They're there. They've cut their teeth. They've got their shorts. They won a couple of awards. But the jump now from the short budget, I'm using a language of accountancy, going, look, the 2 grand, 10 grand, 50 grand, something. You're jumping from a 50 grand to a 500,000, and based on the Netflix and Amazon block, you at a 7-cent return of view, you need to be delivering a 10 million viewer audience to get back your 1 million.
And that's
something
and
just to break even.
That's difficult in Ireland, particularly for some of the more sort of the less commercial kind of subject films. But I think it's multifaceted. So I think what you were saying, Garvin, that the big companies, the big producers tend to go with what they know. So they know that these guys are going to be successful. They know they're to produce a script that will make money, that will be good box office. So they have to start looking wider, because those women are out there. Those women writers who've got the screenplay in the drawer, those women directors and producers are there. Some of them are in television, some are in animation, some are making short films, some are making low budget features. They have to go out there. They have to talk to Screen Island, to women in film and television, women in Hollywood, all of those groups, and say, tell us where these women are. We want to find them and we want to give them opportunities. And I think that's important, that they're looking actively for new stories. They're looking actively for diverse voices. They're looking actively for representation of what Ireland is now. And the new TV series Kin, is great in the sense that there's another Indigenous Irish production. And, there's some really talented women in that. And I think, and if you look at someone like Nasa Hardiman, who just made her first big feature film, Sea Fever, Nasa came up through TV, through the soaps in Ireland and in the UK, and said, how difficult it is to get somebody to take a leap of faith in you and make that first big feature. And I think that's harder for women. So the production companies have got better at it. They're now recognizing the importance of doing that and the commercial importance of doing it as well. The stories are what women who are a lot of cinema goers want to hear.
It's half the world audience. I mean, there's always
an audience there for that kind of. So I think it's making that move from the short or the student film to the short to the small budget to the big budget. There are people who can help along the way, for example, Screen Island, but it's not an easy journey. And I think it's not an easy journey, particularly for underrepresented voices.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I found with I've worked with students in the past developing a number of projects, and I've had people work on my own projects. And what I found was that the women were actually the best ones to be the producers, because they actually organized and structured things far better than the fellas did. The fellas tend to be thinking about their cameras, the shots and all this. And when you asked them how much a budget was, they kind of guessed it, they fudged it. But the women actually knew exactly where the budget was and what was going on. And they were better at scheduling things. I was just wondering, is that the experience that you're finding, or what?
That's interesting, George, because certainly when I was president of IADT, where the National Film School is, the women would tend to come in looking more towards producing than the guys. So it was very rare. There were some exceptions, but it was quite rare for women to come in and say, I want to be a cinematographer. I want to be a sound editor. Some said they wanted to be directors. All the guys came in thinking they were the next Steven Spielberg. They all wanted to go into directing or cinematography. So I think there's a bit of a danger in that kind of thinking of saying, well, women are good at the managing and the finances. And what we tried to do in IDT was say, you are going to try everything. You are going to be the grip. You are going to be the sound editor. You're going to be the graphic person. You are going to be the director. You're going to be the producer. You're going to try it all. You are going to to be the post-production guru, because then I think women were opened to more opportunities across a range of areas, because the applications for funding that used to come into Screen Island with women attached to projects, it was never an issue to get 40% of projects with women as producers. We never quite got to 50%, but you were more likely to get women as producers, less likely to get them as directors, less likely to get them as sole writers, and very unlikely to get them as cinematographers, directors of photography. So I think we were trying to say, let's break out of maybe a little bit of a mold that's there, and say we need to see women right across the whole gamut of producers, directors, writers, and they're all really important jobs. But I think it's about these need developing. They need developing in Ireland.
Yeah.
Actually, Annie, strangely enough, that the last three individuals we've interviewed, a common denominator was appearing from it. It was not so much writer moving this direction into becoming producer director. It was actually producer, director, even editors to realize that they could write for the ask, write for the budget, bring in the creativity, but they were coming from the business end down to writing in order to be able to deliver on the ask and be able to package the full end to end, as opposed to some of the writers we were talking to were literally stopping there and maybe pushing in a bit further and pretty much saying, no, someone else will take care of that part of it. Those individuals in our mind are going to be less in the queue of access of those that are going to be picked and chosen in terms, unless that story is a very high quality story that can be seen. To move to be writer, like a producer director, you have to nearly understand the editing aspect, the ask of the writing, right for this journey of budget, so you can actually deliver the value product. Would you believe?
I think some of that is necessity as well, Garvin, because if you're on a very small budget production, the producer does end up being three things or four things. It is more common. I mean, if you look at herself, the new Fleadh Lloyd directed, you've got Claire Dunn there who wrote it and acted it and said, well, I wrote it. And then somebody says to me, well, you might need to act it as well. It's kind of, what can you do? What else can you bring to this project? So you often, an excellent film. I mean, she's brilliant in it. So often it is necessity. It is, well, we need you to do two or three different things. And, maybe the kind of separation, specialization happens as you get to the bigger budget movies, but it's not always the case. People are often doing two or three different roles in the film production, particularly in the lower budget ones, definitely.
I think from an editor's perspective, it's through the editing. If the newbies started out in the editing process and understood how a film got constructed from an editing perspective, they would then be able to work backwards to understand how it needed to be shot, to make sure the shots fitted in sequences. And also from the writing perspective, I mean, I've learned to write scripts because I started off as an editor. I worked through the editing process. I understood how sequences would go together, and you could see how to save time. And one of the problems I've had on my journey is that when I've worked with directors that haven't understood the processes, they weren't looking at the overall story, for one thing. As an editor, you tended to look at the overarching story. They were looking from a very linear perspective. They could only see it from, it's got to work from here to here to here. And it would go all over the place because they hadn't got an overarching picture of what the story is. And I think that's something that's really relevant to a lot of what we're talking to directors and producers so far, is that they don't understand how that film is constructed to know how to deconstruct it to then make it from the beginning. And they can quite often overshoot and not keep to their budgets. I know a colleague who worked with someone and they shot hundreds of hours of material, and you're kind of going, well, you've just killed your editing budget because it's going to take 100 hours just to look at it, as opposed to edit it down into some kind of. And I think, is George, that something also?
George, I think that's why the good film schools, and I include IEDT in that, got people to do everything, because I used to meet the new first year film students, and I say that, what would you like to do in film? And I very rarely, I mean, maybe one a year, somebody said, I'm really interested in editing. Most of them didn't. So that's why, putting them in the teams of 6 and saying, okay, you guys over the course of the next year will do everything, including being an editor. And then someone went, actually, I really like this. This is really interesting. And as you say, this is really central to what the film looks like and the whole kind of nature of the film at the end. So I agree. I think doing that, looking at across the range of businesses, the different business of editing, the different business of producing, of directing, less so writing. I think in IEDT, we've got very few who they tend to go a different route if they want to be a writer and then come to film as a result of that, rather than the other way around. But it was really important for them to learn what is the role of the editor, what is the role of the producer, and to try it. And as I say, some of them then went into editing and very successfully.
Actually, what I'm remembering now from an earlier interview with Carl King, like he was working on Joyriders, which is a production just went into post, as opposed to the. I'm learning the language.
Yes,
I barely know the language. But the one thing he sort of pointed out there was we've touched on the editing, we've touched on the higher jobs of we want to be the writer, producer, director. But what seems to be happening in the industry because of the growth of streamers and the amount of studios coming into Ireland and England is there's a below the line bunch of all these extra jobs which we're sort of missing. It's like from locations to costumes to this. I don't know where they are, but there's a massive demand for maybe they want more cameramen, they want more sound guys, because functionally this is what the big guys are here for. They're here for the high value job, to get that tax break, to do it in the minimum amount of time, to get back to where they are because they have the out themselves. So they're here to spend that money in the Irish environment on Irish jobs and Irish tourist film accommodation. And therefore, are we actually missing a lot of jobs? Like the construction want to build 300,000 houses. There isn't an apprentice to be had for loving their money being incentivized to go into the market.
That's interesting. I mean, you're right. You know, when the big production companies come in here, they want to get everything. They want the soup to nuts, you know, so they want every aspect of the film production. And we do that very well here. We do have very talented crew and very talented actors and, you know, very talented location managers. And I think, the film schools tend not to produce those people initially. So what Screen Skills Ireland did, which is a part of Screen Ireland, was put on a lot of training and a lot of courses and a lot of development for the craft side, if we can call it that, for the crew, for the location managers, for the people who would be managing the set, who would be directing and managing the extras, who would be the people, the runners, all of those jobs that schools saying, I want to be a location manager generally. They were providing that kind of training and that kind of development and professionally based courses. And I think that is the way to go, to say we need that side of the business of film to be developed, to be trained, to have a career path and to contribute. Because you're right, locations bring people in to Ireland. We have a huge amount of wonderful locations, but if you don't have good location managers, catering managers, logistics, transport, all of that, the film falls flat on its butt very quickly.
One of the things that I found with the students that I was working with, and also through my own career, was that you had to come up with your creative plan of how you wanted to make films and produce them later on, but you also had to do the practical thing, which was to find a job that was the career development that would allow you to learn that craft, but also pay the bills. Yeah. And make sure you could pay your car and, if you wanted a family, all those kind of things. And those became a relevant part of it. So it is a kind of dual system that you have to come up with. One where you develop your creativity, but that could, as you said earlier on, take quite a few years to actually get to where you want to. But in the meantime, you've got to have another career, which is the jobbing thing that brings in the money and teaches you literally the accountancy side of things to make sure you can literally run your own little business, I think.
Yeah.
Really.
And I mean, there are a lot of people who are working as runners or as, kind of production assistants, 3 ladders down, who are probably going to be, I know a couple of myself who are going to be wonderful producers in 10 or 15 years' time, but they, they're not well known now. They have their creative ideas, but they are working on Vikings or Valhalla or whatever in order to get that experience. And it's like actors. My daughter's an actor, a budding actor, it's waitressing jobs, it's temping jobs, it's all those things that you do to keep body and soul together while you're in between acting jobs, and that's the business of film, unfortunately. It isn't, for most people, it's not a well-paid 9-to-5 occupation that you are going to have, the same amount of money at the end of each month. For producers on each project, it is, where do I get the next money for this? What happens if this goes wrong? And I think during COVID, that was particularly important. We kept the film industry going, but, things shut down for a month because of COVID, or things were delayed, or people couldn't travel. So all of those things that impact on finance and the budget really hit people very hard. So, producers I have huge admiration for. They're dealing with and they're juggling a whole number of different things and possibilities all at once.
The accountancy keeps on kicking in. I keep on saying in all the shows, I don't want to be the accountant. I was the accidental accountant. But it's in there. And when you look at all the news, over the COVID time and all the rest of it, there's an awful lot happening in the entire industry. The consolidations on the streaming side, the power being taken away, the upside for the investor, because they have the market, they have the 100 million customers. They're changing how you access it, the OTT platforms. But one thing that's interesting in Ireland and England, before pre-Brexit and now maybe post-Brexit, is the growth of studios. Because what is really happening here is the studio's not here for studio. And, the studios house talent. They're here for the money. They're here for the tax break. Because a bunch of accountants internationally somewhere are saying, if we can make it in one shed versus another shed, we don't need twice the amount of customers on the other end to be in profitability. We're past break even based on even Ireland and England. If all things were equal, a 20% tax break, I think it's 80% to 25%, or a 32 to 37% tax break, you don't have to do the maths on break even to go, I need half the number of customers. So if I have to say, so we could, as a nation, if we can get over the hurdle of planning permission and grannies uphill stopping wind farms and actually get those studios built, then any accountant will be building them here, not in England in the morning. And you can effectively be twice as attractive to any investor or accountant CFO somewhere else on the planet to be going, this is where the money needs to be. And when the money is here and if the location is there and the talent is movable, then Ireland is the hottest spot on the planet to be for studio build out. Why aren't we building more studios? That is
a really good point. And we are building more studios. I mean, Troy was a wonderful addition to what was happening in Ireland. Yeah. So, prior to that, it was, as you know, mostly Ardmore studio in Ashford, which is just down the road from me. Yeah. Troy really regenerated Limerick and, brought in Big Productions Foundation, etc. There are plans for a new studio in Galway. There's plans for a new studio near me here down in Greystones and Wicklow. There's plans for a new studio in Dublin. And what the international companies are saying, we need the new studios, but we need them big. We need big sound stages.
I was going to say, that's it, Annie. I've seen all the pre-planning and the planning and the ones that are there, and there's effectively a doubling of what's in pre-planning is effectively a doubling of the capacity that's there now. Actually, the capacity that was there now, give or take a couple of pieces, has just been consolidated by Hackman in the sense of the studio managers. So they actually took over the legacy. They're saying what they're doing is they know they can leverage the margin. That's what they're about. By that definition, if you double the space of like 100,000 square meters or something in the morning, could fast track build it, you'd actually move the queue of England to Ireland because you've got to hire the problem here is planning, not planning here, and not also the what you call the slate planning of the big buys, and that they will take out 5 years of 10 years of total capacity based on pre-purchasing that tax break. If only we fast tracked a shed
I agree. I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer to say we need those.
It's a no-brainer.
We really need to facilitate. Now, I'm a big environmentalist as well, so clearly the environmental impact is very important, and the kind of fitting in with the environment. But you look at something like Ashford down the road; it looks beautiful in the environment. You can't see the big building; it's landscaped, all the rest of it. It is perfectly possible to do that. The other thing I think it's worth talking about, which we haven't touched on, is the whole area of jobs in animation. I mean, animation now is huge in Ireland. Not only Cartoon Saloon with Wolf Walkers, but Brown Bag, Jam Media, Boulder Media. All of those companies are doing really, really well. So there's a huge rake of jobs there in the tech side, CGI, not only students who have studied animation and who come in and maybe are the creatives and the producers of animators, but people who've studied computing technology, who've studied design, who've studied graphics. There's a huge market there, and that is great to see that industry.
Right. That's a weird thing, Annie, because what we're saying is the jobs are about to double and triple because content is driving the demand. Where are the people? We know the streams they need to be going into. We've got to be doubling and tripling capacity of the college's output. We can't actually address the gender imbalance if it's not being addressed on the way in the door of who's going in.
That was something that was a problem that we were seeing in one of the colleges I worked in, where because I'm looking at the games industry at the moment, because the Unreal Engine is getting to a point where you can use it in live video film production, because Mandalorian, the Star Wars thing, they used it. And there are other people now starting to experiment with filmmakers with green screen and front projection, but linking it with the games engine. So you need those people who are doing, so they can do in-camera shots now to try and cut those costs down from the big expense of the CGI afterwards. And that's now opening up possibilities. And I'm even seeing, especially in England at the moment, there are a lot of little companies setting up doing model making and building small sets to do special effects the way they used to in the 80s and 90s. So we're going back in a cycle, because now there was one production, I think it was Moon, Brian Jones's film, where they looked at the cost of CGI compared to the cost of making models. And the producer asked this model maker how much it would cost, and he said 45,000. And he went back and said, "Did you drop a nought off the end?" And he went, no, we could do your film for £45,000. And they went, "Oh, well, we're going to go with you, because we've been quoted 450,000 for anything else that would have been done model making." So that the CGI stuff is now gone way over budget, but they can make little miniatures and still make them look good on that side. So you are talking about the games industry, which inadvertently is the animation industry, and you're also talking about model making. So there's a whole load of things that looked as though they were going out.
There's lots of jobs.
And you're also talking about design. You're talking about costume designers, you're talking about production designers, makeup designers. And I think going back to the college issue, it's very expensive to run those kind of courses in college. Very expensive to run costume design. It's very expensive to run animation in terms of the space, the kit, everything that you need to provide for students. And at IADT, we used to take 30 kids on animation, because that was the kit we had and the specialist staff in order to teach them. So, there is an issue of funding of higher education. There's an issue of, STEM being important, but my goodness, how important are the arts and film and the investment needed in that. So there's another kind of area of development within higher and further education. You have the wonderful Ballyfermot and other FE colleges that need to say, we need to expand this. If you talk to Brown Bag, they're bringing people in from India, from Brazil, from Canada. They'd love to be taking more Irish people. I guarantee that all the students who left IADT's programs over the last few years in makeup design, costume design, production design, and animation are all working. They're all working in the film industry, the animation industry. Some of them have gone to London, but not that many. So the jobs are there. We need the investment, as we need the investment in the film studios. We need the investment in higher education, special.
Actually, we went to a couple of probably talks. I think Screen Iron were given the talk a couple of years back, and I think there was another one, like let's say last year. But what the research, I think they were doing their 10-year plan, and it was leading towards that. And they carried out a bunch of research. I think Crow might carried out research for them, in Europe or thereabouts. But what was in the room was education and industry. There was about 100 participants, but both industry was sitting there going, we've got jobs, we've got a lot. We want more people. We want them fit for purpose. We want to give them the jobs. Could you give us them, please? That's the ask from industry to education. And education was asking the questions, what do you want? We already answered that. We want ready, fit for purpose people to go to work. We want to give them high paying jobs, but we don't want to train them. We're industry. It's not our role to train. Now, in education was saying, great, now we know what you want, but our problem is legacy. We're stuck in old buildings. Our budgets are dropping. Our government support is dropping. We're now being asked to do more with less. How do we solve this problem? So the weird thing is there's loads of jobs because the industry says they're there. They're about to grow 12,000 new jobs in Ireland. This is before the growth, the exponential growth. If we could attract some more studio space into Ireland, we can move more jobs to Ireland again. But the problem here is we don't really have the accommodation. Cartoon Saloons at the bottom of the road for me. I'm here in Kilkenny, and they says we physically have to clone people. And actually, even if we did it, unless we set up a tent village, we've nowhere for them to live. There's a weird holistic thing going on.
There are things that, if you were thinking outside the proverbial box a little bit. I mean, I was at IDT, we were talking to, at the time, there was the plan to develop a big film studio in the old gas bottle site in Dublin. Now that appears to have, kind of fallen by the wayside somewhat. And, we were talking about part of IEDT being there. Why does it all have to be on the campus in Dún Laoghaire? Why can't you have the education arm of, Ardmore, or the education arm of whatever, right there on the campus, using the space, but using, IEDT staff or whatever. So I think there's a bit of kind of lateral thinking needs to happen to say, how can you strengthen that relationship to education and industry, which could be co-location, which could be some kind of partnership that I think would be very much welcome.
Actually, you hit the nail on the head, Annie, because we literally sat in that room and says, the answer is a hybrid.
Yeah.
The answer is, you gotta be. How do you industry wants to, is about a profit making machine. It's in the business of making money and needs to give back to its shareholders. Now, admittedly, it needs to invest in people, because what that industry is comprised of highly educated, continual professional development, staffing, and they want to keep them because they're selling them at a profit and what their services and output is. But at the same time, education. We've got to re-empower education for fit for purpose output. We've got to increase the output capacity, because that demand, the supply and demand curve is not aligned anymore in my books.
Galvin, I think I would be with my fellow presidents, and without being too crass and putting too fine a point on it, the discussion was how you fix the holes in the roof in an aging campus in Galway, not how you develop a new building, and that's putting it a little. But you know what I mean?
That's the problem. We've got to move the playing field. We've got to take the student out of the campus and into the business. And we've got to wrap the education around the individual, not the location.
But one of the other issues that we also got out of those meetings was the fact that a lot of the people that were suddenly finding themselves in heads of department roles had just been, migrated upwards. So they were also feeling that kind of imposter syndrome, that they were trying to find their own feet, and they were suddenly being asked to train people and they didn't know quite what to do because they were trying to find their feet. But the other problem was that was the job description. That a lot of the people that were trying to kind of find some kind of development didn't quite know where the boundaries of the job stopped and finished, because everybody was seen to be doing multi-hyphenated and they didn't know where their job finished and stopped. I mean, when I started out as an editor, I knew what my role was as an editor. I knew what my role was as an assistant. We knew what the camera operators were and all those. There were defined jobs, but there seemed to be, as my career developed, I suddenly found myself doing 15 different people's jobs. And it was like, when do I let go of this and hand it over to somebody else? And that seemed to be one of the problems, because they didn't know, who do we want to train up? At the moment, we need this, but that's that job. And then tomorrow it could be this job. And a lot of the problems that they were having within the companies was that they didn't have the people long enough to train them under the training packages that they were being told to look into, to try and get those funds back from the Section 481. So there were those kind of issues that those industries don't quite know how to fit the people that are coming out of college into their system, because they haven't got those systems defined enough. I don't know if that's something you'd experienced yourself.
A little, yeah. I mean, there's two sides to that again. I mean, one is you actually do want people who can be flexible. They need to know what their jobs are, but they can move across and they can segue into things. But yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to jump back in and go, we sort of are asking questions we already know half answers to. Where do you see the opportunity, Annie, in Ireland right now to solve some of the problems, to create new opportunities, to what should we be doing to make the difference, if only we could get the funding?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things, and I think we've touched on them all, so this might kind of round it off nicely. I mean, certainly the studio space is a killer. As we said, we have great crew and cast and locations and talent, but the studio space, fixing that, giving the incentives to get those built quickly, to get them fit for purpose, to get them flexible, I think is really important. I think the training we talked about for the non-producer, writer, director, that getting those schemes, working with more of the kind of stuff Screen Skills Ireland is doing, working with the studios around training. I mean, RTE used to do a lot more training than it does now. And we understand the reasons for that, but it's getting that training element in so that somebody coming in has got a clear career path. I think that's really important. And I think the tax incentives really have to be fit for purpose. They have to be enough, and they have to be simple and efficient for people to avail of. I think there's when I was in Screen Island, we had a great relationship with the revenue, but it was sometimes the case of producers feeling as though revenue thought they were trying to do the taxpayer out of money rather than seeing it as an investment in something that, is good for Ireland and good for the economy and good for Ireland's reputation abroad. So I think that kind of relationship and that development is important as well. And then more places in higher education, more better funded kit and places for the next generations. And then a lot of the stuff that we're doing around diversity, the importance of different voices, the importance of women's voices, Black and ethnic minority voices, disability, disabled community voices, the trans voices, all of those voices, those stories being heard, being told, being invested in, I think is making a big difference as well. And it's happening. We are beginning to see diverse faces on screen and diverse stories, but there's still a long way to go there. So if we could do all of those things, we would have the investment. I do think, as I argued, I wrote an opinion piece for the Times about 6 months ago saying, get the Netflixes and the Amazons and all the rest of it to pay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the order. That's the thing. I mean, I heard everything you said there. And the strange thing is, actually, you did it nearly in the perfect order. If we sort the studio comes in. The money is in the house. The jobs are created. They want the content. They have all the opportunities. These are the things for these people to train them up in. So the strange thing is, it needs to be nearly in the order of the money. The money empowers all. Then it'll be used to invest in all. It will get that tax break by doing X, Y, and Z. But it's to make it more, as you said, even being an accountant and even asking the question I've asked before, the pain that I keep on coming across is compliance, regulation, over-administration, red tape. They've got every color tape you can think of. It is not making it easy. It's making it difficult to enter into the process, because all that tape and compliance is really about is empowering the machine to then actually fill up with all this content of people and opportunity and training and education and output of content. But we got to empower the machine, but we have to finance the machine to empower those other.
We have to trust the film industry. We have to trust that they are, in it to make good movies, that they're not in it to make mega bucks and scams and all the rest of it. And do what France and Germany and other countries have done and put a levy on Netflix and on the streamers of Disney and all the rest of it. It's 3% or something. And the government has said, yes, we're going to do that. Do it. Stop talking about it and do it. And just trust the film industry. We pride ourselves in Ireland on being artists and writers and storytellers and creators. And as chair of Screen Island and now chair of the Fleadh, I see that all the time. And we get a lot of praise from the government when the normal people comes out and it's, worldwide recognition and all the rest of it. But they have to back that up with not just the photo opportunity with normal people, but the day-to-day support, the lack of bureaucracy, the investing in the industry, the trusting the industry, and really supporting it at grassroots level. If they could do that, then, I think that would be great.
Now, I'm going to ask a mad question, because this was the same. No, there was a weird. Who's they?
I suppose, it does vary who they is. Often it is revenue and it's the Department of Arts and Culture and the Gaeltacht. And I have to say, various ministers came and went when I was involved in Screen Island and now in the Fleadh. And Catherine Martin, has shown, I think, a strong commitment to the arts during COVID. We want that commitment to continue. We want that commitment to the arts, to recognise the importance of it, not just as a palliative care system during COVID. It's not just that. It's not therapeutic. It is an important industry in itself. It is an important set of art forms. So, government understanding that, funding it, supporting the development of studios, supporting the arts and education, all of those, I think, would be really, really important. And I know it's difficult. Governments are, always looking to the next election. They're in it for the short term, often rather than the longer term. But really, that kind of civil service commitment and revenue commitment, I think, would be really important.
Well, actually, what's interesting now, there's a little hint of that happening by the government if we look through the maths. And what happened is, I think the pension fund has invested in a percentage of one of the studios. And therefore, that now is classified as a strategic asset class. Therefore, those studios are a strategic asset class now recognised by the Irish government and backed up by the tax break. The bit that's missing to me, is this they're doing it for data centers. I think they're a bit of fast track planning. And once it's a strategic asset class, they've indirectly opened the door that if a big studio something wanted to walk in the door, we need to be doing 100,000 square meter something. And the something, in my opinion, because you touched on it a little bit earlier in the conversation, green film. We need to be building with the future in mind now. It needs to be fully holistic. It needs to be future proofing. It needs to be moving 50,000 jobs to Ireland for the foreseeable future of 10 years. And that can be done now with green film initiatives under a strategic government initiative of fast tracking a mega studio
and film
build.
Studios are very clued up on sustainability now. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but now they really are in everything from how much water they use and how they use it, how they leave the site and what they plant and everything. I think there's a huge sea change there, which is very, very welcome in terms of the green film industry and sustainability. But I just think, certain people in government will really push the boat out if I said there's a big new film studio opening, but a lot of them will say there's a big new data center opening or Amazon are coming to Ireland. And, we've got to have that same excitement to say Hollywood is coming to Ireland or Bollywood or a film studio. Let's get that sense of pride and excitement in those kind of investments, or a new higher education institution is opening. Let's get that, as well as, the furore that we get when there's a data center or Amazon or, Google or whoever it is.
We're gradually coming towards an end, but we haven't had really a chance to talk about the Galway Film Fleadh, which I think would be worthwhile, because I know that over the last 30 odd years, I've managed to get there quite a few times, one just to watch films, but then also in the business side, doing the markets and stuff. What if someone's starting out, or they're just trying to get a movie sort of planned at this point, how best would they be able to utilize what the Film Fleadh has to offer to them?
Yeah, I mean, the Fleadh is wonderful. I'm delighted to have taken over the chairing of the board. And it was different this year because it was one or two exceptions. We did have a wonderful open air venue that worked really well. You mentioned the markets, George. The hotel where the Fleadh is situated, there is every possible kind of film worker there. There are producers there, there are investors there. There are film company executives. So that's a really good place to start. And, the markets and the industry events that are there are specifically tailored to link, people with a story, people with a script, with a development executive or with a potential producer. So, a young person, or not even a young person, but somebody with an idea can go to the Galway Fleadh, and hopefully it will be real next year as opposed to virtual. And they will be able to sit down, have a formal session, their time sessions with those guys. They can sit with them in the bar, they can sit with them in the coffee, they can go to their presentations, they can go to their industry events, they can talk to Screen Ireland, they can talk to people in the Fleadh, and they will get a lot of context and contents and contacts and a lot of development opportunities. They will also get to meet people from the film industry all over the world, not just the superstars, the Gabriel Byrne of the world, but, people who are actively involved in the whole range of occupations across film, and they will learn an awful lot. It really is a super festival. Given the kind of size of it, it punches way above its weight in terms of developing the next generations of filmmakers, offering them opportunities, but also showcase an Irish film and animation. So I would strongly recommend, and I used to recommend to all the students, get yourself to the Fleadh, get a notebook in your hand, talk to people, take down numbers, take down names, follow it up. There's an awful lot you can do to make those connections at the Fleadh.
Well, I was there for about 4 days in 2017, and I don't think I actually got to see a movie because we were talking to people in the pubs and they were producers. And in fact, I got chatting to one person, and I was in the marketplace just pitching ideas. And it turned out the person I spent the last 2 days with was one of the people I was suddenly pitching to. And I didn't realize, but it was really good to see how that worked. But also the seminars.
Sorry, if it's any consolation to you, George, as chair of Screen Ireland, I used to go to the Cannes Film Market and Film Festival. I probably saw 1 or 2 films the whole time. I saw 1 film in Galway this year. You're doing the business side of it, which is great.
But that's it, Annie. If you're going to watch the films,
Exactly.
you're not doing the business. So that's for the tourists to watch. Now you get to watch them in your own time. But that brings us back to a nice little end. It's the film of it's the business of film. That's what the Fleadh is. The Fleadh is on the world stage.
I was just saying, but the same in Cannes. My diary would be full of meetings with countries looking to do co-productions, with people looking for locations in Ireland, with ambassadors who wanted to come and, talk to the Irish talent or whatever. It would be business meetings. It would be people wanting to set up a new studio. And then, as you say, I'd get to watch the films maybe later, hotel, or when I got back even. And it was quite often the case where people say, "Oh, what did you think of that film?" And I would say, "Well, I've heard it's great," but I haven't actually. But it's all part, as you say, of the very important business of film in Ireland.
Well, look, we're really coming to the end of this episode, I think, which I think would be quite good. It's been a fairly detailed episode. We've gone through what the needs are for writers, producers, and directors, looking at students who need to consider the holistic view of a film and all the different component parts that they need to sort of be trained in and at least experience once as they go through their own training. We also looked at the issues of studios that are now coming into Ireland and how they need to function to help sort of train the new incumbents into that. And we've also been exploring the different areas, animation, live action, the gaming industry. And of course, one of the most important things is also the Film Fleadh, the Galway Film Fleadh, and how important it is. And I know from my career, all the way for the last 30 odd years or more, I've managed to get there quite a few times, and it has been a very productive experience. So I would highly recommend it. Not to go and watch the movies, although they're great, but to network and to get to know people and start to promote your own films and projects, because you never know, you might be showing your film the next year at the Galway Film Festival. We normally just give our guests a quick. Is there anything you'd like to say that you didn't get to say during the last 45 minutes or more?
No, I think we've had a good conversation. I hope it came across how passionate I am about Irish film, and my particular interest is diversity in film and women in film. So I think those, and as a higher education, ex-president, the importance of training young people. So I think you kind of covered all those, George and Garvin, and just to really encourage people to go to your cinema and watch films. And that sounds a really crass thing to say, but actually it's really important with cinemas reopening, with film reopening, that people get out there and they support them, because, that helps obviously grow the Irish film industry. We love the Hollywood blockbusters, but we love our Irish films.
Any last words, Garvin?
No, I just really liked the last thing you said there, Annie, because it was the piece that was left out. It was there's the customers, there's the revenue, there's the sustainability that makes it happen. Go do again. So do support what you see in front of you. Make it a profitable something for those that invested in before. So if you want to see more of the same, that's how you do it. We need to watch more. Definitely.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our show this week. We hope you enjoyed it. That's our 100th episode. And we are really pleased and fortunate to have Annie Doona here with us to talk about her perspective. And I think we've been enriched by the experience as well. So thanks very much for watching. And I hope you get a chance to see us again next week. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.